All right, let's get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Keystone Sessions. This is our first session of the evening, the 5 o'clock session. The title of this session tonight is The Psychology of Success, Tech, Education, and How to Save the World. Just to, scope us in to, we're here to save the world tonight. So this is originally intended to be the kickoff for a new series that's going to be hosted by our partners at Launch Code to talk about technology and education, that intersection and the importance of technology innovation, the acceleration that we've seen of that innovation from a technology perspective, and its impact on the traditional educational landscape. And are we really taking advantage of that? Are we really leveraging that technology to change those traditional models and to really elevate the success of our educational system? So I think we'll talk a little bit about what that success looks like, what it means to achieve success from an educational perspective. We'll talk about, we'll have a couple perspectives on how that technology is impacting that ecosystem and our educators. And I think we have two great guests that represent different ends of that spectrum that we'll be able to talk to. The key challenge, as I understand it, is the speed of innovation. When you look at industries, and I use that term loosely, that are I'll say mired in a traditional way of thinking, I find it really ironic that our educational system is one of those, because they are the ones who are really putting people out into the workforce to tackle the larger challenges or the economic, the progress that we need from an industry perspective to keep us competitive and really to allow people to achieve their own personal success. And so if those institutions, those educational institutions aren't able to keep pace, we have a pretty significant problem on our hands. So today we're going to explore that intersection of achieving success and technology's role in that education. And to kind of kick things off, Pan from Launch Code provided a quote from the KC Tech Council. I thought it was interesting. It's a part of the quote, but it says, "We seek to build a more connected, more competitive, more representative tech workforce through programming, coalition building, advocacy, and opportunity." And I really think that's kind of the spirit of what this series is going to be about. So I want to go ahead and welcome our two guests. Ken, you know how this goes. I think you've been here a few times. Kayleen, I don't introduce people, so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. So if you tell us maybe who you are, a little bit about what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Well, my name is Kayleen Collins, and I've been an early childhood educator for upwards of 20 years now. I got my undergrad in psychology and my master's in school psychology, and went the route of looking to do school psychology, but found that it was a little too hands-off for me. It was a lot of, giving IQ tests and things like that, and then just talking to a bunch of adults and writing reports. So I was like, nope, I want to be in there. I want to do the coloring. I want to do all the things, get paint on me every day, that sort of thing. So I wanted to be more in the trenches, more hands-on. So I have embedded myself in just educating the little ones for a long time, and I find a lot of joy in it, and it's really great to see how they just can flourish in the right circumstances. So
when you say little ones, what's the age range that you work with?
At this time, I'm mostly with, we'll say 1 to 5 year olds.
Okay, so pre-K, kind of that pre-K range.
I'm more in a director role now. I've been mostly a teacher for a long time, but recently I've got promoted, so yay!
Congratulations!
New adventure for me. Managing grown-ups is new for me. So,
which is harder, the little ones or the grown-ups?
It's
you don't have to answer
finding
that.
out. I'm still learning. It depends. Grown-ups don't bite usually, so that works out. But for the most part, I've mostly worked with that age group. I have done a little bit of teaching in elementary and upwards, mostly substitute teaching, and found out my niche is with the younger group. So.
And you're with World Builders Academy?
World Builders Academy. Mm-hmm.
Okay. For those who don't know what World Builders Academy is, will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, they are a play-based Reggio school that really looks to kind of be child-led in how we approach. We use our environment, we use the things around us to educate as much as we provide education for we find out from them what their interests are and kind of build on that, versus just like, this is, we're learning A today and this is what we're doing. It's more, oh really, you love trains, well let's explore trains, let's see what that's all about. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Ken, tell us who you are and what you do, man.
All right. My name is Ken Ma. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. I got a chemistry degree, and then that's ultimately what led me here to come to Kansas City. So I got a job out here at ExxonMobil, worked there pre-pandemic until the pandemic happened. The oil and gas industry wasn't doing so well in the pandemic, and I was one of the ones who said, hey, I don't really want to be in this field, and I took a severance package. Taking that really just changed my life, opened up my time slots. So all the startups and opportunities that I passed on in the past growing up, I was able to say, hey, yes, I want to learn more about what you're building, what you're doing. That ultimately led me to going out to Silicon Valley. I've been working with startups back out there for the past 3 years, and recently Silicon Valley Bank crashed. So I came back here to Kansas City, and I looked at my life, and I looked at what everyone else that I grew up, what they were doing, and I realized I was given multiple second chances. And so now I'm here at LaunchCode as a business development manager, and I never would have thought that I had a chemistry degree and then I would get into sales, or I would get into venture capital. There's just so many different pathways for me. And so that's why I wanted to give back with LaunchCode and give other people second chances and second opportunities, and break into the tech world.
So, and how long you been with LaunchCode now?
Yeah, so I've been with LaunchCode officially a week and 3 days.
Really?
I mean, a month, a month and 3 days.
Come on, I was going to.
A month and 3 days. Sorry,
I've known you longer than that, so it has to be longer than that. All right. And what do you do there? Like specifically, what's your role with LaunchCode? And did that change yesterday?
Of course. Sorry, my brain scattered. It's been a long day. So I'm the business development manager here. My job is to build relationships with companies to help the supporting arm of LaunchCode. So if you guys aren't familiar with LaunchCode, we are a nonprofit coding and upskilling accelerator with the staffing arm. So I work on the staffing side, where I build the relationships with companies, and then I help the graduates find jobs and apprenticeships at these companies. So
it's I know we started this series with you two because you represent each end of that spectrum of improving education at the same time. Like, what's the ultimate outcome and what's the ultimate impact of that, the ultimate purpose for that. So for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to frame success as to have the ability and skills to attain what we want and provide for ourselves. So for both of you, developing confidence is about belief in ourselves. In your work, how have you seen confidence or lack thereof create barriers in a person's path to success? And we'll start with you, Kelly.
Yeah, I just, I'm with the littles, so I see how encouragement can go such a long way with convincing a kiddo that they can do more than they think they can. We're dealing with, putting shoes on and, pulling up your pants and, basic things. But we find a lot of kids come in having a lot of things done for them. And it's really great to see how how many things they can do on their own, even at a young age, when their confidence is built up, when they're encouraged and motivated to, do it themselves. And then we get to the point where I do it myself and they can't be stopped. So, but it's great. It's really great to see, when we get new kids in that, can't put their own shoes on or their own jackets or certain things like that. And they really flourish and they get excited about doing things themselves. So that's kind of the end I probably see the most with confidence.
Gotcha. Ken, how about you?
Yeah, so I guess my childhood influences on confidence were a little bit different. Grew up in a very strict Asian family, and so we were just told, keep your head down, don't try to stick out, don't try to do XYZ, just essentially just be a worker, right? So for me, I've definitely, as I was growing up getting into the workforce, I struggled with that. So it was always, I'd meet a new person, but I wouldn't say anything because I was like, okay, just keep your head down. Don't have a lot of confidence, and sometimes I still struggle with it today, even though I'm more of an extrovert now. I'll go up to someone and say, hey, I'm going to talk to them, and then sometimes I do pause, which I try to not have that affect me, but I think that environmental stimulus, as far as where you're or how you're raised, does affect your confidence.
Ken, I want to stay with you for a second. So as a person who works with adult talent, how have you seen the population who comes from marginalized communities, some that may have suffered trauma, how have you seen that affect their ability to be successful?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So again, like me, I know that there's other people with different types of culture backgrounds, whether if they're in a marginalized community, sometimes they have a thought process or connotation that, okay, maybe I'm not good enough to do this job, or maybe I'm not good enough to go do, whatever it is that they're expected to do. And so some of those people do struggle, and working with them at Launch Code, it's a matter of just pushing them and saying, hey, we taught you the skill sets, you've clearly demonstrated it in your portfolio, and you know how to do it. So it's a matter of just coaching them through the process of being able to let people know that you can do these things, and once they start seeing it, then it's a matter of, okay, well, they're just like everyone else. There's not really a barrier, because you can pretty much learn all the skills, and now it's how do you apply them in a way that someone can understand what you're communicating.
And Ken, have you seen those barriers be related to what I would call more essential skills, or the technology itself, like adopting the technology or using the technology itself, or some combination of those?
I would say for the most part, the technical skills, I think most of the applicants, that's not the issue. I think it's mainly the soft skills, like being able to say, hey, I made this really cool project. It's on GitHub. Here's all the code. I can explain it to another developer, and then you go out and you explain it to the person who's supposed to sell the product, and they have no idea what you're talking about. I think that's sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge, but we definitely work with them on that, on how to be able to explain it in layman terms that someone who doesn't understand coding can understand it.
And Kayleen, our earliest experiences really shape, how we filter information, how we deal with challenges, and so on. If we experience trauma, that then can affect our ability to succeed, how do you see that impacting them, whether they be internal experiences or external experiences?
Right. I see it in, like, maybe not so much the kids I have in my class at the moment, but like I see it with different groups I've been around. My heart goes out to these kids that, maybe were told from a young age, oh, you're bad, or you're stupid, or whatever, just the language in the home or even at school, maybe just the way that information is presented to them. If they don't get it right away, then it's like, well, sorry, you missed out. I see all these things that when a kid is nurtured, they can do so much and go so far. But when they are, even in infancy, like kids that are not held or, fed, they're not getting their basic needs met, they're not going to focus on, I really want to try to learn how to crawl right now. No, I'm not going to do anything because I'm hungry and I need comfort, sort of thing. Like they can't even focus on making that next step if their basic needs are not being met. But like, I feel like encouragement and things like that are also basic needs that really, really need to be met. And I feel like in some areas, people don't understand even how to encourage or how to, promote that kind of growth. So it can have, I mean, and so then it becomes a filter by which everything continuing on in their life, they filter it through, oh, I'm stupid, or I'm bad, or I'm whatever they might label themselves as, or whatever experience, I did this and I failed, so I'm not going to try that, or, well, my needs are not being met, so, I'm not going to even try that either. So it's kind of it's like a stepping stone, I think, and if they can't overcome those basic things, then it's going to be a lot harder down the road.
We talk about this a lot with Kyle Hollins, who runs the Lyrics Institute, when he talks about, survivability mindset and how so many of our youth come from, environments where survival is the mindset that they grow up in, and that doesn't allow them to have that thriving mindset, and that there's that cognitive behavioral shift that needs to take place. And I think we lose the sense of the imprint on their psyche and on their mental being that happens at that young age that is then carried on through all the rest of this.
And I would say too that it's something that's observed too. So like I have a friend who his dad always said, I'm not smart enough to go to college, or I was never smart enough to do this. And so the son would see or hear his dad saying that. And so he started feeling like, well, my dad's a really smart guy, and if he's not smart enough to go to college, then what does that mean for me? So then he felt like his only option was choosing another path, which was the military, he thought. So but then once he got out, he was like, you know what, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to try this. It is something that can be overcome, but I think that he lost a lot of years in there thinking that he was not smart enough to do certain things because of what he saw around him. So
yeah, that we hear and see that far too often. So in regards to this integration of technology in education, I mean, I think these things, iPads, AI, they're all being billed as potential, the opportunity to bridge some of these gaps that we see in the system and how we deliver education. And I know both of you work with technologies and different technologies, whether it's with the littles or in the adult learning space with Launch Code. So for both of you, how do you see technology and education as an advantage or a disadvantage to change how we successfully train, or how we shift that mindset for individuals? So Kayleen, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think there's a lot to be said for what can be learned through what we can get from the internet. We just are working on a project on the ocean, and being kind of landlocked here in the Midwest, there's not a lot we can just show them about the ocean physically, but there's a whole world that opens up to us with the internet and different IT things that we can do. But like, I think that as long as it's being regulated, we don't want to just say, here's an iPad,
here's the open internet, go have fun,
learn about the ocean,
yeah.
knock yourself out, see what you find. But I mean, I think that there needs, and I think that the human component, the teacher, is so important in that, because it can lead the student to explore things they might not have explored on their own. Parts of, we'll say the ocean, did you know that there's mountains under the water? Like that's what we learned about yesterday. And I think that they might not have even thought about, looking into that.
Right.
But those mountains, some of them have volcanoes, that's a whole new avenue. And it just can really take you so many places. But I think that, just handing a kid an iPad and having them, or whatever kind of technology, and being just strapped to a screen all day is really, it's really not what is good for their development.
So we want technology integration, not technology led, right? Not technology leading, that kind of piece. Ken, how about you in the adult learner space? How do you see the use of technology in the delivery of that education as an advantage or a disadvantage?
Yeah, I think with newer technologies, it can be super helpful. Prime example is, when I went to college, I may not look that old, but I'm a little bit older than what most people would say. When I had to write essays, I had to...
There's some smart comment I have in there about 15, 16. No, all right.
No, I'd have to go to the library and get the encyclopedia, look up, what topic I was looking on. And sometimes I wouldn't know, but the encyclopedia is out of date. So I would write an article I would present to the professor, and he'd be like, "No, that's wrong." And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's in the encyclopedia." So, a lot of the topics that I had to go through, I had to spend hours, and then when I find out it's wrong, it's very frustrating. Nowadays, with access to the internet, you can pretty much find valid information, and you can easily cite it without having to memorize MLA formats and things like that. As far as like malicious or not malicious, or maybe wrong information, if you rely on Wikipedia too much, sometimes that might not be the best source to source what you're trying to talk about. Quora, Reddit, you can have a lot of false information. So I mean, those are pretty much the biggest downsides. Since it's so much more accessible, someone can just publish whatever, and as long as there's a bunch of thumbs up or likes or views, you might think it's accurate.
It's a fact. Yeah. If it's on the internet, it's a fact.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So AI is, there's a lot of conversation right now about artificial intelligence and its impact on critical thinking. And there's a lot of back and forth on, is it a tool to improve critical thinking? Is it going to damage people's ability to develop those critical thinking skills? And a lot of the focus in our traditional educational systems is around that, critical thinking starts around, that 8 to 12-year-old range. And there's a lot of still debate about whether that's the case or not. So Kayleen, for you, do you agree that critical thinking starts at age 8? Or how do you feel about that topic?
I would say it starts earlier probably than we think. You can see the wheels turning. You can just see it physically on a kid when they're, like processing information and trying to decide if that's true. Even in, I try to be goofy with them sometimes and make jokes, and sometimes they'll look at me like, was that a joke? Was that real? Like, and that's, I think, the beginning of it, when they can start to understand jokes even and understand things like that, like they can decipher between, is this truth or is this, made up? Like I use a lot of kids' words, so this comes across like I'm talking to a preschooler. That's why.
So you kind of are. It's fine.
Yeah. I do. I speak.
I
simplify my language a lot.
Everybody here knows I qualify as a preschooler.
So, but yeah, that's why I say grown-ups and things like that. But yeah, I really do think that the kiddos, they really can start to critically think at an early age, and I think that AI can be helpful for that if it's used in the right ways. I think it can hinder critical thinking. I have a niece whose grades have improved recently, and she's like, well, I have AI now. So I'm like, well, I hope you're still learning something, but if it's being used correctly, it can really open up it can really take a kid to another level. But if it's just being relied on as a crutch, I think it can be a hindrance.
I had this debate with my kids all the way through, as they got older about, I don't need to learn math because I carry a calculator around all the time on my phone. It's like, well, that's not why you learn math, is to be able to just solve, 12 times 12 or whatever. Ken, how about you on the adult learning side, critical thinking? I'm afraid critical thinking is going to become a buzz phrase, and people lose sight on the importance of critical thinking and what it means to develop critical thinking skills. So how do you see critical thinking in the work that you do on the adult learner side, and whether that's, kind of how impactful is it in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think critical thinking is, it's especially when you're thinking about a lot of people who are coding. Sometimes you may just run into a code and it's a bunch of code and someone didn't put the right comments. You have no idea what it is until you dive in. So you can either use, AI tools. GitHub Pilot's really good. You can just have it, spit out what does this code do, and then you can figure out, okay, this is what it's supposed to do, but when you actually run the program, that's not what it does. So you can essentially dissect it out and say, okay, based on what it's supposed to do from the comments, I need to change this code or this code so that the logic makes sense to do this, and then from there, you can work around and solve the problem that you're set out to do.
it seems as as we have this conversation around lifelong learning, right, and that the world is now it's less about attaining a degree in a specific subject, and you might have several jobs in that career field throughout your career. Now we've turned to this era where people are going to have several different careers. I think you're a good example, Kayleen. Kayleen, like you're going to have several different careers, several different very varied focus areas throughout your job span, your lifespan, and if you don't have those basic critical thinking skills, your ability to learn the information is hindered, but also your ability to be successful in those fields gets impacted as well. The other area of technology and education today that's I think had the most significant impact, and I think we're still trying to understand what that means, is online education. And as we've gone into this world of online education, how do you think that has impacted, good or bad, our ability to access quality education? So Kayleen, I'll kind of start with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to I think I'm older than Ken. So my first online course.
I don't know, Ken said he's like 75 or something a few minutes ago.
Right.
I'm not sure.
So I had an online course when I was in college. It was kind of a new thing back then, but it was very archaic now, I would say, like just the way they presented information and things. It was a lot of just read it and then jump on this blog page and say what you want to say. And I felt like it was not helpful. I felt like learning that way, and maybe it was just me, but I felt like the whole everything that made it enriching was kind of removed, and it was just report after report after report. It was not engaging in any way. But I think a lot of that has changed now with the development of the AI and things like that have really can really help make it more enriching in the learning. I think for kids today, I wouldn't say we have a whole lot of it at my early level of, interacting with online learning at the little's age, but, high school on up, you can graduate as a sophomore almost now with having taken online classes with college, and it can really boost you out into the world a lot sooner. And I think it's not going away. It's something we all need to adapt to and really kind of figure out the best way to embrace it and make it the best that it can be, versus just say, oh, let's just let it be, let it happen. I think we have to be really mindful of how we're moving forward with it, and like I said earlier, keeping those regulations where they need to be to guide it in the right direction.
How much of that is regulations versus, we'll call it, parental oversight and ensure teacher involvement or parental oversight to ensure that those buffers and boundaries are in place?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is a teacher and a parent's responsibility. Like, that's, as a teacher, we're responsible for teaching them how to navigate this world. And this world, I mean, if you're born after 2000, you're born into technology. Like, we all had to learn it, but you're just immersed in it from Jump Street. So I think that that's our job as parents and educators, is to just help the kids navigate life with technology and finding the best way to, not make it a crutch, but to make it something that's enriching for them.
Ken, I had some unique experiences online education. So in 2018, I went and got a graduate certificate from Stanford University, all online. But none of it was time-based. It was all on my own. They were all self-learning, and it was nine full courses, right? 9 full credit courses. But I wasn't really happy with the experience because it was just me consuming information, to Kayleen's point. I had the flip experience when I had the opportunity to do a couple East Coast schools, and it was, you were in a cohort. It was more time-based. It was online. We were all virtual, but we had that cohort learning experience. We had that more integrated learning experience. It was more interactive. And even though I didn't complete the whole degree, I found that a much more enriching experience. How do you see the challenges and opportunities in the adult learner space with online education, and like what opportunities do you see there, and what kind of things have you seen in your experience from that regard?
Yeah, I think with the online opportunity, if you think about access to mentors, you think about access to professors when you have other things going in your life or going on in your life, you don't have to figure out, okay, when can I, balance my work schedule, and then figure out how can I go into the office, and then hope that the professor's there when they say they're going to be there from 6 to 8, and then visit with them, and then actually have the time to discuss the problem you're working on. I think now you can have things like Calendly or some type of meeting scheduler. You schedule the meeting with them, have that meeting over Zoom, share your screen. That makes it a lot easier to work through some of the things a lot quicker. And I found like those types of opportunities, more people are being open to it, saying like, hey, I'll open up more of my schedule. I might not be in office because I have to drive, and I'm not going to make it there at 4. But if you can do like a 15-minute to answer this question, I can do it over Zoom. Just send me the link, and let's do that right now. Problems that I could see arise, it's okay, someone may, I don't want to say from like a learner's perspective, but maybe a professor might just say, oh yeah, I'll just record this video, and the next time someone has this problem, I'll just send it, and then hope that solves the problem, when sometimes it's not a matter of showing, this is the problem, this is the answer, but it's a matter of showing them how do you work through it. And sometimes they just need someone to walk them through the process before they actually get it.
So in this world that we're in now, I think of the Matrix, right? And when, if I could learn to fly a Black Hawk helicopter just by, quickly absorbing the information, the user manual, knowing how to fly a helicopter and jump in it and go, it'd be pretty cool. But we're in this world now where skills-based learning, certificate-based achievement is a bigger and bigger thing, especially with technology and with this online learning. That's on the user side though, right? Like that's my ability to consume information and attain education or attain information. But there's still the placement, there's still the like, how does that realized into my ability to achieve success, which is how we described, or self, economic mobility and those types of things. When do you think we make that shift where employers are more fully open to skills-based, like you understand a skill, we know you're proficient in a skill, and that's all we really need. We can do the rest of it, or you might have another baseline, but it doesn't require the piece of paper. It doesn't require all the ancillary kind of elements of education that we have today in the more traditional path. Where are you seeing that, and do you think there is a tipping point? Do you think we ever get there in terms of how education is delivered from a technology perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely heading in that direction. I don't want to say I've been guilty of that, but being in some of the classes that I've taken, I would go and expect the professor to walk through everything, and sometimes they would just read the PowerPoint. And I was like, you emailed me the PowerPoint before I went, so it's not like I learned anything new. I had to teach
I didn't
myself.
get anything out of this.
Yeah. So I definitely can see, like, from that perspective, there could be challenges, but I feel like as people get more used to those types of things, it's just, hey, it's just that much easier. Yeah.
So for both of you, I think when you think back to your experiences or the others you've known who've struggled with achieving their own success, what are the influences that could have supported a stronger outcome, whether they be human experiences or elements of technology that could have been integrated into those opportunities? Kayleen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot to be said for technology and where it can take people. I'm trying to think if I know any like personal stories of where I think that if they had technology, they would have been better off. I can't think any off the top of my head, but I do feel like it can answer questions sometimes better than just we as people can. It knows more information, we'll say, but I think there's a component of personal, like if I see you come into class and I see that you're, not the same, like that's not something that technology, they can't read your feeling that day. They can't maybe alter the way that it's presented if you're having a bad day, like he's kind of in a mood today, so let's take it easy with how we go into this. So I think that there's room for both, and I think that it's necessary to have both. I think that we need the human component, that personal interaction, and I think that there are people that maybe have missed out on some of that encouragement that we talked about for confidence and things like that. And that's not something that you're going to get necessarily from the technology perspective. But I think that there's a whole wide world of greatness that can be gained from technology too. We really have to find a balance.
Ken, how about you?
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
I can absolutely.
I think my brain is starting to hit that end of the day. I've spoken with probably 30 people.
We'll get you a snack here in a minute. When you think back to your experiences or the others that you've known who've struggled with achieving their own success, what are the influences that you think could have, maybe had an impact on that, or a change in that?
Yeah. So like based on what I'll give you a prime example. So when I was teaching at an accelerator, the biggest thing that helped other people was finding people who had, like minds, right? So maybe it's a startup founder that was working on something in fintech and he met someone else solving a different problem in the same industry. They'd be able to collaborate and say, oh yeah, I understand where that's coming from. I understand how that plays a part of the ecosystem. And then they would say like, okay, this is how I would solve it, and then this is how I would solve it, and then they would work together, and each, completely both solving two different problems, but that type of collaboration helped them jumpstart and understand that, okay, this is why both things need to exist. And I feel like those types of experiences, peer-to-peer, plus experiences of mentors or people who've experienced the same problem before, they'll have a different angle on how do you pursue that answer. And I feel like those types of things really, really impact someone's thought process moving forward into developing a new concept or developing a new idea.
So, I mean, if you've ever watched a 2-year-old pick up one of these things, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Because it took me a while to understand how to use one of these. I will admit it took me a little while to understand how to use an iPad. Hours, not days or weeks. Don't everybody get too excited about that. But you watch a 2-year-old pick one up and it's minutes, and the problem solving to watch them go through that. So I guess my question is we look at technologies like we do an emerging technology series here, and we look at the emerging technologies or the emerging macro industry trends that are starting to happen. How early can we start to introduce things like AR, VR, basic robotics, some of those types of things to the littles? Is there an age where it's too early to introduce these things to them, or are they pretty? Is my sense of watching a 2-year-old pick up an iPad accurate that some of these other technologies, they pick them up pretty quick, much quicker than we do? Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think they definitely do pick them up quicker than we do. And I think that it's kind of an exciting thing for them to, my kiddos could have probably ordered stuff on Amazon before I could too. Like they found the app, downloaded it, all the things that they can do, just giving them a chance to do them is a pretty cool thing to watch them, develop in that. But like, you were saying, like, do we want to do that full blown? I think, I don't know about full blown. I would, like I keep going back to like regulating. That's our job as
Sure.
educators and parents and caregivers. We just have to make sure that we're not leaning too heavy one way or another. Like, I don't think it's something to be afraid of, but I do think it's something that we definitely need to, keep our thumb on, that it doesn't get out of hand. So
those technologies aren't replacements for parenting or replacements for, the critical thinking you do pick up from interpersonal interaction from people. It's interesting to see them adopt these technologies so much earlier. And I think it's important to the earlier they get involved with these things, the greater the likelihood is that they're going to remain in a STEM related or, pay attention to STEM kind of activities as they get older. All right. So I go through I'm not going to say my age, but I go through my decades of life. And I haven't had exposure to those technologies. And then I get exposed to what we do here. I get exposed to some of the things we're doing, and I want to become now, a participant in the innovation economy and understand technologies and understand how they can impact my career. What do you see, Ken, as does that get harder? I mean, have you seen that the ability to pick those things up? Is there like a threshold of adult learning where, maybe not for you, or, I mean, that's pretty harsh to say it that way, but like, do you see that it becomes more difficult as people get older? And how do you address that as someone who's involved in a, adult learning organization?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say it's more difficult, but it's more of they don't have the foundations of experience. Like let's say if you've never used a computer before, and then now you're learning how to use a computer, 20, 30 years later, someone would say like, hey, this is really easy. You just click Google Chrome. But if you've never seen it before, it does take some, I would say, a certain mindset for them to overcome the hurdle. Like, hey, I've never done this before. It's not that hard. You just click the button and then it pops up the Explorer. I think once they get in the habit of doing that multiple times, it then becomes repetition. And then once they have that foundation, then they start realizing, hey, if I can open Explorer, I can open Chrome. It's the same thing. I can open, Firefox. And so I feel like as long as they, like I said earlier, as long as they, if they meet other people who have like minds and show them that it's not that complicated, you just need to show them, then it changes their perspective, and then they start realizing that, oh, I can get into this. And so I'm pretty sure that's very similar to how you got into tech. You've experienced it from someone who's probably younger and says like, hey, this is how I'm doing it, and you get associated with it.
I'll never forget the conversation I had. My daughter, my middle daughter's 26 now, and I'll never forget the conversation I had with her when she was in high school. I said, hey, I want to email you this information. What's your email address? And she turned around and looked at me and said, Dad, we don't use email anymore. And I thought, what? Like, what do you use? And so that was a whole new technology. And I'm running product at Sprint at the time. And I'm like, all right. So she exposed me to a whole bunch of things that I hadn't seen before because I wasn't paying attention. But they were learning them more naturally and faster. But it was through a peer learning model too. It was, that's how the kids in school were relating to each other and talking to each other and doing those types of things. So I think watching a little pick something up and learn it independently, it may be different in an adult learning or peer learning, or that comfort of watching someone else do it, that situational learning kind of opportunity of, I can tell you how to do it, I can show you, but watching someone else do it and then sitting next to someone and you're going through the same kind of things. I mean, I would assume that's the similar experience to what you've seen with Launch Code with some of the adult learners, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just seeing someone do it, live or watching them versus like a video, because if there's something that, you're a little, you don't really understand, you can ask them right away, and they'll say, oh, I click on this button, I can click search and then type it in, versus you just watch a video, someone moves the cursor really, really fast and they try to type something in. It might not click just because it's not a direct interaction with someone who's, again, like-minded.
Sure, mentor, teacher, peer, whatever it might be.
I see that even, now in this director role that I'm in, I have the employees come to me and say, I need to do this, but I don't know how to do it. And it's like, well, let's play around with it and see if we can figure out how to do it. Let's do it together. Or I learned it from some other employee, they showed me how to do this, so now I can show you how to do this, so I think that's important, is being willing and to be humble. I mean, I got very humbled when I had to ask my daughter how to use Canva for the first time. So she's 13. Right. I was like, how do you even know about Canva? Well, we do it at school all the time. Okay. And I think that with the littles, they don't have that feeling, oh, this is a big and scary thing. It's just a cool thing on a tablet. I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
You know, like I'm just gonna push. They don't have that fear of messing stuff up either. They don't have that.
They've
fear.
never gotten an F. Yeah.
They don't have that fear of, oh, I might end up spending thousands of dollars of my mom's money on Amazon. So like they don't have that fear because they don't even know that that's something to be feared. So I think there's a lot more, I mean, confidence, or call it what you want, but like they don't have those things hanging over them that are hindering them, that fear of making that step either, or making a mistake or making a fool of themselves or something like that, that I think us as adults, we might encounter a little bit more because it's our own self-talk that we are just telling, wow, you know, the internet, that's a big thing. I don't know. I don't want to do something wrong, because we know that we could do something wrong, but we don't necessarily have to have that fear when we have others around us that can, you know, walk us through it, assuming they're patient with us.
Sure. Excited to continue the conversation of, you know, technology and integration in this, or technology and education in this intersection, and how this continues to evolve. So it's kind of the closing question for both of you. What excites you about the future when you think about how technology and education are starting to, the impact of technology and how education is being delivered, or how we deliver the education around how to use technologies, those types of things? What are the things that excite you about what you think happens in the future, or what you see happening right now?
Well, I've been kind of learning more about AI and things in the classroom, because my kids, I have one who's going to be a 5th grader and one who's going to be an 8th grader. And, you know, they just are experiencing a lot more technology than I ever did as a student. So I'm trying to learn more about, like, what are they learning about? And it's like, I watched a thing that was talking about, you know, you can write a report and say, are my facts correct? Or, you know, and it can check it for you, you know, without judgment. It wouldn't be, I mean, maybe you're writing a political review, and without judgment, it can check, you know, make sure that you're saying things accurately. So like, I think that there's just so much to be gained from all of this technology. You know, like I said, with the right guidance, and I'm kind of excited to where it can take us. There's that part of me that's like nervous about it being in the wrong hands, but I think that's just something that it's going to have to be addressed as we go along, no matter what. So
I think every technology has that potential nefarious side of it, but that world, you know, do good side of it as well. So I get that.
I think that, you know, like teachers in that, you know, I'm not really grading papers. I think teachers that have to grade papers or do things like that can be done digitally now, and it doesn't have to be taking all of their time, and they have more time for the things that really matter, like the interactions with the students and stuff like that. And I think if they're not so consumed with all of the tasks they have to do, as far as like that sort of thing, like documentation or whatever, like they can focus more on the whole student and what their needs might be. They might be more apt to notice, hey, it seems like he's coming in hungry every day. Maybe I can help him get some breakfast, or,
right.
You know, those things that technology can't really do. They can't sense or see. So
makes sense. Ken, how about you? What excites you about the intersection we're seeing, or the acceleration of this actually that we're starting to see?
Yeah, for me, you know, I taught myself some coding skills, and I started seeing that, you know, some of the newer languages compared to legacy languages, you can just do so much more without having to write as much code. There's, you know, packages, libraries. I like to code in Flutter, so it has things called widgets, which are essentially components of like a button or, you know, whatever that you need. And the way that you can write code to create an app now is just way easier than it would have been 6 or 7 years ago. And so seeing those advances in technology, you're seeing a lot more people coming into the coding world and picking up tools to build cool projects. And so now it's a matter of time where, you know, not everyone, but like most people would have some idea of how does coding work, or how does building something cool work. And then they're just going to build something. which then leads to more people testing ideas to maybe creating companies. And I feel like that for sure has been picking up. And I've seen it over the course of, I want to say 7 years, and it's just rapidly expanding. And I think, as that happens, we're going to see really cool stuff. Like when you're thinking about, how long it took us to go from a shoe size cell phone to pocket size cell phone. We're going to see things like that faster and faster. Minus the smartphone, because I've seen the smartphones are getting bigger now.
Yeah, we're going back the other direction. Yeah, yeah.
But
tablets in your pocket again. Yeah.
Yeah, technology. It's definitely allowing people to be more creative and just develop new things.
Yeah, I think making it more accessible to everybody, and it broadens the pool for ideas. Someone 3D printing a beak for a duck they found that couldn't eat because it didn't have a beak. Who would have thought of that? Or how did they even get to that point? But that's just such cool stuff. And it, I feel like sometimes people in certain fields have a certain mindset to be in that field. And I think when technology is more accessible to everybody, and everybody kind of at least has a basic understanding of it, then you've got such a broader scope of ideas. And kind of to your point, more people can do more things. So
I think we have a ways to go to get that in front of everybody have access. I think it's an aspirational thing for us, but I agree, once you have that access and that opportunity, the world opens up to you in an amazing way.
I think that our new generations are all learning it. So I think that that's not that far down the road, really, because their access in schools, most schools have technology of some sort that they can get into, and it's promoted. So I think that that's really cool that will be an outcome of it.
Well, thank you both for kicking this series off with us. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time. Appreciate what you're doing with the littles, with the future of technology. And I appreciate what you're doing to make sure that we have a workforce that really can support the economy here in Kansas City and in the region. So thank you both again for spending some time with us. And we're going to go ahead and take a break before we get to the next session. So thank you both, and we'll see you guys in about 5 minutes.